Okay, so there is a truth in that video, and I'm going to give it to you by way of speaking something I like to do now and then. This is what Captain Obvious says. You have got your note sheet there in your bulletin. Maybe you've got a pen. Hopefully you've got a Bible. I'm going to give you Captain Obvious says today, and it is this: guys and girls are tempted differently. There you go. Write it down. Mark it. You heard it in church. Guys and girls are tempted differently. Now, you can see from that video that the guys are tempted towards a physical relationship, and like is the term. And then our modern society uses this phrase, hook up, to talk about people getting together when they shouldn't be getting together in ways they shouldn't be getting together. And so, I mean, that's the one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is that women are like, no, I want close relationships with guys. I want closeness. And so there's a very clear distinction. There's something else I wanted to show you. Just highlight how guys and girls are tempted differently. One more video clip. Here you go.
I will get up and walk the dog at 6:30 a.m. I will eat some fruit as part of my breakfast. I will shave. I will clean the sink after I shave. I will be at work by 8 a.m. I will sit through 2-hour meetings. I will say yes when you want me to say yes. I will be quiet when you don't want to hear me say no. I will take your call. I will listen to your opinion of my friends. I will listen to your friends' opinions of my friends. I will be civil to your mother. I will put the seat down. I will separate the recycling. I will carry your lip balm. I will also vampire TV shows with you. I will take my socks off before getting into bed. I will put my underwear in the basket. And because I do this, I drive the car.
How many of you saw that during the Super Bowl? That was one of the Super Bowl commercials that played. And I went on YouTube, I found the clip on YouTube, and then I found that, lo and behold, there's some women who have made rebuttals, and they're very wrong. Don't look at them, because I'm not saying they're just morally questionable in some of the things, but yes, that plays on stereotypes. It plays on some stereotypes, but the reason advertising to stereotypes works is that stereotypes sometimes are true. And so there's this sense that guys are tempted that I'm going to put up with all this feminine society, world kind of stuff so that then I can be a man at some point in time. And there's this concept in advertising that men are just looking for the opportunity when they can be a man. And that is symbolized by virility and sexuality and strength and things like that. And then at the same time, you got the commercials on television that are advertising something for women. And those commercials generally flow in the direction of, you can be beautiful just the way you are, and here's how to have a better relationship with people, and here's the ways to be more beautiful than you really are, and all kinds of things like that. They definitely are skewing towards different segments of the population. And the reason chick flicks are chick flicks and action flicks are dude flicks are because the stereotypes are sometimes true. And they're not true for everybody in the same way, but they are sometimes true. And that's because gender has been wired into us. Gender is intrinsic to who you are, and you can never get past it. And there are parts of gender that actually play into shaping you and fashioning you into something. And there are parts of gender that you kind of have to overcome to be the person God wants you to be. Over the last few weeks, we've been taking this phrase, born this way, and we're trying to reclaim it from the world around us. Because, see, the world around us uses that phrase, and it's usually coming from a segment of society that wants to advocate particular sexual relationships and behaviors and desires that are outside of what the Bible teaches. Various different kinds. But it boils down to this basic claim that who you are born is who you are supposed to be. And the only way to be fulfilled in life is to be who you were born. And we have to recognize that, yes, we're all born with different tendencies. I'll tell you, one of my tendencies, I was born with this. I think it's ingrained in me. I think it's just, part of who I am, and you're not going to be able to change it. I really like chocolate, and it's born in me. From the earliest days of me having chocolate, I thought it was an amazing thing, and I decided I want more of that. And now I'm older and I realize, indulging in chocolate sometimes does give me joy. But is who I was born who I'm supposed to become? Is who I was born how I'm supposed to be? See, here's the thing. There are aspects of who you were born that affect who you are, but do not determine who you become. And when we look in the pages of the Bible, what we find in the pages of the Bible is not a guideline on how to redo your birth. It's a guideline on how to become who God is leading you to become. Because He wants us to be with Him. He wants us to have a relationship with Him. And in order for us to be in that place where we can have a relationship with Him, two things need to happen. One, we need to be cleared out from our own crud, and then we need to be shaped into His treasure. And that's the process God is at work on with all of us. And so we've been talking about this, we've been using this phrase, born this way, to say, yes, there are ways you have been born. Temptations, desires, identity, things about how you've been born, but that doesn't determine who you become. And so we've been talking about that. What I want to do today, though, to close out our time, is I want to raise back to the surface some passages of Scripture we looked at in the first week. I didn't have enough time to get through all of those passages during the first week. And I don't have enough time to get through all of them today either. But I'll tell you what I do have. Today, I've got one clear focus. What I want to do is I want to take some of these passages, some of these commands about guy and girl relationships and commands to women and commands to men, and I want to just raise one simple principle with you. If God puts it in His Word as a command, that means most likely it's not something we naturally do. Most likely it's something that naturally we would want to go in a different direction. Or if we just played out our own life by our own timetable, by our own desires, we might go in a different direction. So God puts commands because He knows there's something that's better for us than where we would naturally want to go. So in other words, every time you see a command in the Bible, there's a hidden temptation on the other side of it. That God is trying to say, you might be tempted to do this, but this is how I want you to live. And so today we're going to analyze some of these commands to find out what are some of the predominant temptations that guys face and that girls face. And we're not even going to talk about the surfacey, easy ones about guys might be tempted to certain types of magazines or internet sites, things that you shouldn't be looking at or whatever. We're not going to even talk about that. We're going to talk about even a level deeper than that. What are some of the temptations that guys deal with on a deeper level? What are some of the temptations that women deal with on a deeper level? And how do we conquer them? And the first place we have to turn when we want to talk about this kind of how to conquer things is to talk about your flesh. Because your gender is intrinsically connected to your flesh. And the Apostle Paul has some very clear things to say about our flesh. So if you look at this first passage, I actually printed it out on your note sheet. It'll be on the screen. It's from Romans chapter 7, verses 5 through 6. And Paul says this, "For when we were in the realm of the flesh, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in us, so that we bore fruit for death. But now, by dying to what once bound us, we have been released from the law, so that we serve in the new way of the Spirit and not in the old way of the written code." It's hard to explain all that right now without reading the rest of the chapter, because this is his topic sentence for the rest of Romans chapter 7. And in fact, it's a sentence in the middle of 3 chapters, Romans 6, 7, and 8. And you take all those chapters together, and this sentence sort of forms the topic sentence, sort of forms the central thesis, the claim, in all these in the whole chapter section. And if I could just summarize it, make it pretty clear for you, hopefully, it goes like this. Paul is saying that the law creates sinful passions in us. All you have to do is try reverse psychology on someone. You set up a law for someone, and that's initially the thing they want to now do. You say, don't touch that. Well, now the kid wants to touch it. You say, don't. I was going to this meeting this last week, and as I walked into the door, the sign said, "Everything blue is wet paint." You know what I wanted to do. I wanted to go in there and see if it was really wet paint. I've never touched the walls in that place the entire time I've gone to these meetings in this location. I've never touched the walls, but this last week, I wanted to touch the walls. And I was like, I'm just a little bit, just one. So you give someone a law, and now instantly their sinful passions, their passions are kind of, they rise up to the surface. We know that. I tried reverse psychology on my kids a few times. They didn't go for it. And then I realized I didn't want to encourage it anyway, so we just sort of stopped that. But that's what Paul's saying. He says the sinful passions are aroused by the law. And he's wondering about why that works. And the reason it works is Paul says it's something about us being in the flesh. So that's what it said at the beginning there. When we're in the realm of the flesh, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in us, so that we bore fruit for death. In other words, that leads us to a life that is no life at all. It leads us to an experience of walking death. It's not fulfilling. It's not the kind of life God designed us to live. But then he goes to a different place. He says, but now, by dying. And this is a different kind of death. There's a death before that seems like it was bad. And now he says, but now we're doing death as a way of moving forward. He says, by dying to what once bound us, we've been released from the law so that we serve in the new way of the Spirit and not in the old way of the written code. So here's how it goes for Paul. He says there's a problem with us. We're stuck in our flesh. And because we're stuck in our flesh, when God tells us a law, we want to reject it. We want to do our own thing. Basic, simple, the law reveals our temptations. And the law highlights our temptations. That's just the way it works when we're in the flesh. But then Paul says there's a solution, and the solution is to die somehow, and then to move on to a life based on the Spirit. Not so that we can ignore the law, but so that the law and the passions don't have that kind of weird relationship, that now we can live from the standpoint of the Spirit. And the way it happens through the rest of this chapter and the rest of chapter 6 and chapter 8 is simply this. We die when Jesus died. He died for us, and when we accept that death into our lives and when we are baptized, we are joined with Him in His death, and in a sense, we literally die to our old lives. And then He brings His Spirit into us to bring new life. So it basically goes like this. If you are in the place where you're focused on God's law and how you can't measure up and how you don't want to obey it, then you are stuck in this place Paul would call the flesh. But there is a way for you to move to a life based on the Spirit, and it all comes down to whether or not you have fully received Jesus and His death in your life. And we can talk about that more some other time. If you have, you know it. If you haven't, you need it. So today's your day to say, hey, I need this. And there's even a checkbox on your card that you can mark down and say,